we're hoping that over the year, many of you will be able to contribute to these presentations. But I decided to be the guinea pig and stand up here and do the first one. And I've chosen as the topic, adapting stories for the stage. So welcome those who are arriving. And just a reminder to those of you who just arrived that we have notes that you can refer back to later from the board at the back behind you. Click it and make sure you get version 2. So it's now 2:30 and I'm a great person in believing in starting on time. So I guess most of you know I'm Bajoy. So hello, I think I know all of you. So it's good to have you here. And thank you very much for coming along. Now, what I'm planning on doing is doing a presentation first. So we won't interrupt that with questions or applause or anything, you know. And then at the end of the presentation, I'm hoping there'll be some time for some questions and answers, also some shared experience. And at that point, I'll get out from behind the podium and we can just open it up for an open forum. So if that's okay with you, that's the way we'll proceed. So again, I'll just write one more time. I'm in voice today, for those of you who might not be in voice yet. So good. Well, I like this opening slide called Adapting Stories for the Stage because it shows some of the actual stories that have been adapted for the stage over the time since we've been going, since 2015. And all of them were stories that were taken and then somehow made into magically, or not so magically, into plays. I'll be using many of these as the basis for discussion today. Just before we go on, the one in the middle, as you see, East of the Sun, West of the Moon, that was written by Kalia and directed by Kat and Kalia, was based on a folk tale. The double bill that you see were 2 shorter plays, one based on Barty's original story that he adapted for the stage, and one actually based on a poem story by someone that Edie adapted for the stage. ACT 700 Cinderellas was also a folk tale, 3 different folk tales from different parts of the world based on Cinderella that were adapted. And then the others, Hundreds of Hatchies, The Legend of the Poinsettia, and Long Time Dreaming, were more closely based on stories that were written by someone. So a couple of different ways you can find your story then. By writing your own, by using a folk tale that's come down through generations, and by using someone's story that, of course, you credit fully in the program or in your notes. Okay, so let's begin. I wanted to just give a little overview first of the kinds of productions that ACT has done. We've adapted plays, adapted stories, novels. We've had original performance pieces, dance dramas, and musical reviews, and even some musicals. But what I'm going to focus on today are stories that are adapted. So what I may say today most closely relates to a story being adapted to the stage, not to some of the other forms that you see there. So let's start. A play is not a story, and that's important to remember, although it may be based on one. A play has quite unique characteristics from a story, although it also has some things in common. Just as a general idea, in a story, readers and listeners use their imaginations to visualize the characters, action, and settings. So you think about when you go to the Bard's events and you listen to a story in voice, or you see it in local chat, you're using your imagination to create the characters, the setting in your own mind, based on the descriptions or the dialogue that's given in the story. In a play, of course you use your imagination, but more is provided tangibly for you. The director, the actors, and the designers bring this adapted story to life for the audience, and they do this through their interpretations of the characters, the sets, the costumes, the movements, the lighting, and the sound. So all of that is provided for an audience. And so it's based on the script, the interpretation of the written script of the play. So that by means of a basis. So how do you go about getting this story that you've got in front of you that you really love onto the stage? And I just think, for starters, it's important that you very closely analyze the story that you have in front of you to see what's there and what it's saying. And I'm sure that most of you have heard of these concepts before, but they're really important, both within a story and also within a play. So the plot, or in a story, the storyline, the unfolding of events as they occur. And this usually involves characters. So I could really have had characters in brackets under that as well. So the unfolding of events, the structure, the backbone of the story. How is it organized? How is it put together? And the theme, the underlying idea behind the story, or maybe it's more than one theme. Stories have these. Plays also have these. And what you have to decide when you're starting to write your adaptation is, are you going to have the same plot, the same structure, and the same theme or themes as the story, or will you change some of these elements to make it work better on the stage? I think one of the dangers in adapting a story sometimes is that we try to too slavishly put in absolutely everything that's in the story. And sometimes that slows the play down. Sometimes in a play, you have to look for the essence of what the story is about. And you do this by analyzing first what the plot, the structure, and the theme of the story are. So let's go into this in a little bit more detail. What is the plot of your play? So when you're writing it from the story, what is the action or the conflict and how does it unfold? And instead of drama, and the word drama implies it, that conflict is at its heart. Not necessarily battles and that kind of thing, but conflict of emotions, feelings, events, situations, some problem that presents itself. And that's true on the stage as well. We have an opening situation that evolves to what we often call in a play a denouement, or a climax in the play where things are resolved. A bit like a story too. You have to decide in your play, when does the action occur? What time in history? What time of day? And so forth. And where does this action take place? What is the setting? Or is there more than one setting? Or if the story has about 35 settings, what are you going to do about that? It's probably in a 20-minute play, you're not going to be able to have 35 settings, so you might have to consolidate and cut it down somehow. And then, who are the characters who carry this action forward? One of the things, just think about Cinderella, for example. If you're going to stage the ballroom scene, are you really going to have 50 people in that scene? So the writer has to think how, even at the writing stage, how we might be able to scale this down and present it on the stage. So the plot is important. Now, this is an interesting idea, and I encourage you, as you're writing your play based on your story, think about what is each character's journey in the play that I'm writing. We say that they each have a journey, the main characters anyway. And I'm going to refer to a play called In the Time of Flowers, which we did, which was based on the story of how the seasons change. And it's about Persephone and Demeter. Demeter is the mom and Persephone is the daughter. And Hades steals away Persephone to the underworld. And as a result, she eats a pomegranate, 6 seeds, so she can return up to earth to help her mother create the flowers in the springtime for 6 months of the year. But 6 months of the year, she has to stay then down with Hades. And Zeus, of course, is there watching over all of this. So I said to myself, what are the main journeys of these characters in the play? What do they do in the play? Well, Zeus doesn't do much. Sorry, my apprehension, how he plays Zeus. But Zeus sat up in his chair the whole time, and maybe he stood up once, and he came back down at the end. But really, Zeus is the chief god. He's up there. He's stable. He doesn't change. He's all-knowing, all-powerful. Hades, on the other hand, had this pattern to his journey. He took Persephone away. Then he gave her back to her mom at the end for 6 months. But then the deal is that every 6 months he's going to take her back again, and then he's going to give her back again. So his whole pattern of journey was a take, a give, a take, a give, a take, a give, through eternity. Then we've got Demeter. Demeter loses her daughter. You know, this god comes up to the ground and steals his daughter. So she goes on a quest. She goes to Zeus, asks for his help. She travels the world, and finally she finds her daughter. and she's able to bring her back for 6 months. And what about Persephone? Persephone starts out very innocent and naive, and she grows in maturity. So from being a flower child up above the earth, she goes and comes down and is the actual wife of Hades. And so she goes from being a child to a woman in this show, in this script. All right. So these are ideas to keep in mind when you're writing, because they make your play stronger if you know what each of the journeys the characters are going to be making. This kind of thought as you're going along. Now, I speak very quickly, so if you need me to pause, just say pause. But I hope you're following me so far. We're talking about the elements, plot, structure, and theme. We're looking at plot now, and related to plot are the characters that enact this plot. And we just talked about what is each character's journey. Now, this is another really important thing when you're writing a play. Consider what is each character's voice. I don't mean do they sound gruff or do they sound, innocent or whatever. I mean, based on their background, their gender, their social status, their age, their level of education, their personality, the time they are in history, how will each of them speak and interact with other people? And I put some characters up there, and you can see just from looking at the visuals that each one of these characters in dialogue in a play would probably talk a bit differently. They all talk the same. It wouldn't show up their character. So a professor would talk a bit different from Asa, who's a young lass seeking her lost love, to Adelina, who's a little lass from Mexico, who actually in the script that we wrote had a few Spanish words to say, to a priest, the kind of language he would use, to a lion. He didn't say much at all. In Albert and the Lion, he growled a lot. So consider when you're writing dialogue for each character, the style of a dialogue. So a king would speak differently than a peasant, right? I mean, you'd think so. Are you going to write in full sentences or not? Now, we have this kind of hangover from grammar and English when we used to write, and the teacher used to say, no, that's not a full sentence. That's not a full sentence. But when you're writing dialogue, we never speak in full sentences, do we? I mean, some of us may do, but not, I went to the store and I got some groceries. It's more like, yeah, I went along to the store and I picked up some groceries and that was great, So you have to make the conversation live in your play. It's got to be like it's real. It's like real dialogue. The other thing that we tend to use a lot of in our formal writing is I will, the full verbs, rather than contractions like I'll go along. But if you have a little girl saying, I will go and I will go to school today, I'll go to school today, So try to make it more conversational when you're writing your dialogue. And if you don't know if it is, say it aloud. I talk all the time when I'm writing plays. And record it, listen back. Does it sound like what that character would actually say? They may use certain characteristic phrases a lot. Or they may actually use formal language. I've just finished writing a play which drove me nuts because it was called If Music Be the Food of Love. And I was trying to set it in Shakespeare's times. And so they used a lot of the nouns back then. And so trying to capture Shakespeare's language without actually alienating the audience because they can't understand what you're talking about, you have to kind of work on that. Okay? I want to give you an example of a play that I went to in real life where all the characters talk the same. It's quite a dramatic thing. It was a play. It was a drama. I went, and I'm not necessarily against expletives if they contribute to the characterization in a play in real life. But these characters, every other word was a swear word. And it wasn't just one. Like, you could understand it if one character really, was off the rails and was using swear words. But swear words were used by every member of the cast over and over and over again. And so it sort of dilated or diluted the meaning of the show because you were so busy listening and thinking, what does that word mean? That you really didn't get the meaning. So I think the idea is to make each character speak in their own voice as much as you can when you're writing your story. So that's all I'm going to say about character right now. I'd like to talk then about the theme of your play. Now, the theme is an underlying or central idea behind the play, and I'm going to give 3 examples from shows that we've done, and I hope I've got it right. East of the Sun, West of the Moon, which was Kelly and Kat's play. I really think that the underlying theme for that was love conquers all. You've got Asa who goes off, her true love looks like a polar bear. She's got to break the enchantment. She follows him to the ends of the earth. True love conquers all. Or, in long time dreaming, goodness will be rewarded. This poor lady gets stuck outside when Sleeping Beauty's curse comes on, and so she's the only one that doesn't sleep for 100 years. And of course, she grows old, while the rest of them stay the same. And so in the end, after all of her service, keeping the palace going for 100 years, her guardian angel comes along and rewards her goodness and takes her away from it all, up to the stars. And then I think probably the main message for The Legend of the Poinsettia is believe in miracles. That was a little Christmas show that we did on December 25th. And of course, it was all about the Christmas story. And what happened was some weeds turned into beautiful poinsettias when the little girl came to give them as a gift at the church. And also the miracle of her mother coming back after being sick on Christmas. So some people say, oh, my play, I don't want to write with a theme, my play, oh, that's not important. But you know what? Even if you don't think you have a theme, you do. Even if you haven't consciously put a theme in your play and built ideas around it, if you look closely enough, you will find that there's a theme there, either stated or unstated. I was really amazed once when I was writing a series of short plays, and I hadn't thought about theme a lot, and almost every one of them had as its theme, when I got thinking about it, the value of being at home, or home is a place to be, or home is where the heart is, that kind of theme. Even though I hadn't intended, it came out. So if you can articulate what the theme is as you're writing, it will make your play stronger. And one reason is this. Sometimes when you're writing, you get writer's block. Or you have so much stuff you don't know what to use. Then you go back to your theme and say, what's the theme? What theme am I trying to get across here? And what is important to the theme and what isn't? If it's extraneous to the theme, as good as it might be, delete it. And your play will be much stronger, so that it has a clear pathway, a clear theme underlying it. Now, this ties in then, of course, with structure. And I'm sorry there's so much information on this, but I just wanted you to have it in your notes, so if you wanted to go back to it. Now, a structure for a play is the play's shape. And if you want to think of a backbone or a coat hanger, everything needs to fit within the backbone to make the whole body work, right? It needs to be operational and functional. Same way with a play. You need to have a clear structure so that everything, the action that happens, the characters, all tie in and can hang off the coat hanger and work well. So let's start through this then. And we have different ways. These probably aren't the only ways, but these are some ways I thought of that we've actually used in plays, in act. Sequential is quite prevalent. We've used a lot of this. This happened, then this, then that. And that's in the order of events until a resolution is reached for the conflict or the problem that the characters faced at the beginning. Okay, so they face a situation, they go through everything, and it's all resolved to a satisfactory, at least, ending, if not a happy ending. There's also a quest. And this is where the main character sets out on a quest or adventure, and he faces challenges. And each of these challenges must be overcome in order for the quest to be successful. This was true of Hundreds of Hatchies, the show we did, which we'll be hearing about in a minute. In media res, a fancy word for saying starting in the middle of things, and then you start in the middle of things, then you flash back to earlier times, or you flash forward to later times. But this one you have to be careful with, because you've got to make sure that the audience can follow what's happening when you're flashing back and forth and in and out. A perfect example of a play that used that was The Toymaker's Gift. We started in the middle of things. Christmas Eve, kids get the toy, there's a nutcracker, the little girl helps to break the enchantment. The prince comes and he then takes her to the forest of memories, where he flashes back to how he became a nutcracker. And then when that's finished, he flashes forward to the kingdom of sweet dreams. So that is an example of a play that we've used, where it's in media res. And I hope it worked, because we knew very clearly that we were in the forest of memories, and he was remembering. We also knew that he was taking her to his kingdom of sweet dreams. So it needs to be signaled within the play what's happening. In the text, which was the case here in the script, or when you get to staging, you can probably do a lot of things with sound and visuals as well. Okay, a cycle. That's a return to the beginning, a little wiser. So the characters start out, they go, they go through all this, and then they come back to where they started. I think In the Time of Flowers was a bit that way. We started with Demeter and Persephone up in the flowers, making the flowers grow. Then they went through this series of experiences, and at the end of the play, they came back, and they were up, causing the flowers to grow again. But the audience did know that's only for 6 months, and then she's going to be back down there again. Okay, the last one, a play within a play. So within the main play, there's another play that's staged that often gives insight into the main action. Hamlet's a good example, where Hamlet has these players come and give this play about the murder of his father. That's a standard one. But we used a little bit of that in The Legend of the Poinsettia when we did a pastorale, which was a little Christmas play within the bigger play. And it was the story of the shepherds and how the angel came and called them to go to Bethlehem, but the devil stopped them. Now this tried to stop them, but, didn't succeed. And they went on and they worshiped the Christ child in Bethlehem. Now it's interesting because this play within a play is really the essence of the play. That's what the bigger play was all about, because all of the villagers went to the manger scene bringing their gifts, and then the miracle happened. So that little play and that story was a play that actually gave insight into what the main action was all about. So that's another example. Okay, let's review. I've talked about a lot so far. We've said that a story is not a play, but it can be based on a story. A play is not a story, but it can be based on a story. Sorry, that's what we said. And that there are key elements like plot with characters, theme, and structure that are important for the writer to keep in mind as they're writing the play. I want to talk about one more idea, which is, I think, extremely helpful. I found it amazing when I first discovered something called surface structure or surface meaning and deep meaning. And it's helpful if you look up here on the picture and you see that you're looking at a sea view and you see what's above the water and what's below the water. I guess it's a bit like the iceberg technique. But the surface meaning is what you see on the surface. Like who does what, when, what they say about themselves and others, what happens from the opening scene to the end. It probably is most similar to plot and character, what's happening on the surface of the play, what the audience sees, But when you're writing, if you do an analysis of deep meaning, you can come up with some really amazing ideas. If you don't know what to do with this play, how to adapt it, this might be a good idea. Looking at the deep meaning within the story relates to the patterns and symbols that are embedded within the original story, and they can give really interesting new insights. And I'm going to show you an example. Let's take something like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, okay? Well, we know what happens, basically. Most of us, Goldilocks comes along, she goes and she eats the porridge, and everyone's too hot, one's too cold, etc., etc. She sits in a chair, she breaks the little chair, she goes in the bed, and she's found there. When the bears come home, they chase her away, more or less. Nursery rhyme. But what if you see all the picture? I like that, because what if you broke all the things up and rearranged them in a different way? Just break up all that on the surface and try to show it in a different way. What if it was the scene of a crime where Hannah, the child intruder, creates havoc until the bears return and chase her from the cottage, reporting her to the local constable? I mean, that's in there. She's very naughty, and she's breaking the law, so to speak. And you could add a constable at the end, and she could get her comeuppance. Could be called Horrible Hannah or something, or whatever name you chose. But if you chose to focus in your writing on that, your story would be quite different as a script than it would be if you were actually just writing a surface story. Now, another way you could look at that same story is that look what happens. Papa Bear's porridge, you can also do a Freudian analysis of this, but we're not going to go into that, okay? So Papa Bear's porridge is too hot, the chair is too big, the bed is too hard. Mama Bear's porridge is too cold, the chair is too small, the bed is too soft. But Baby Bear's porridge, chair, and bed are just right. So the child's things are just right. So you could start with that idea and maybe write quite a different script about Baby Bear maybe even becoming a friend of Goldilocks because she's a child too, and they know what's best, whereas the others don't. So it's just an idea, a quick idea of showing you how you can take a story and maybe look below the surface of it and find other ideas in the patterns and in the symbols that might be there. So you might choose to use a light as a symbol or a hammer as a symbol in your writing. It's up to you to kind of decide. Now, in the last few minutes that I have, I'd like to just do a little case study here. And this is the case study of Millions of Cats and Hundreds of Hatchies. Hundreds of Hatchies was one of the first plays that we did at ACT a long time ago. And it was really an adaptation of Millions of Cats, which was a children's picture book classic from the 1920s by a lady by the name of Wanda Gag. And in the picture book version, a woman sends her husband to find a little cat for company. In the script version, the play that was adapted from it, there's a lady who sends her husband a night to find not a cat, but a hatchie for company. So you can see right away what the changes might be. The storyline, the plot, and the structure stayed pretty much the same as the story. It was basically a successful quest eventually. What happened at first is that all the cats wanted to come home with the man, and my lady got upset and said, no, you got to just choose one. So they had to choose the one that was the most suitable. And likewise, that was the same with the hatchies. The theme, I guess if I'm going to put a name to it, is persistence is rewarded. It's the same. So if you look hard enough, you'll find what you're looking for. The title was a change from Millions of Cats to Hundreds of Hatchies. The setting was a shift from a general folk tale type of writing, a general folk tale landscape, if you like, to actually a villian. So it was set in a villian. And the characters, the main characters, the woman and the man, remained the same, but the cats became hatchies because hatchies was more relevant to the villian situation. Now, this is an important point, this last one. The narration and a little dialogue that were in the story were shifted to dialogue and action only in the script. Now, we'll talk a little bit about the narrator in a minute when we get to questions. Very often, I can't say anything definitely about narrator because sometimes it's appropriate and sometimes it just gets in the way. So you have to think carefully. A narrator or narration is characteristic of a story, whereas action and dialogue are characteristic of a play. So if you don't need a narrator, if you really don't need a narrator in your play script, don't use one. Do it in other ways. Instead of saying the sun shone brightly, the narrator said the sun shone brightly on a small village in a villian, what you do on the set is you write a stage direction, setting, a villian, midday, and then you let the director and the designers show that rather than tell it. So whenever you can show rather than tell, do it. It makes the play more active. I wanted to show you also about how to lay out a play and compare it with how a story is generally laid out. Here's the beginning of Millions of Cats. Once upon a time there was a very old man and a very old woman. They lived in a nice clean house which had flowers all around it, except where the door was. But they couldn't be happy because they were so very lonely. If we only had a cat, sighed the very old woman. And that is a little bit different than the bottom. The bottom says, there's some directions here. Bird song, Lady Lenore enters, sits in rocking chair. Knight Gareth enters, carrying a rose, and he kneels, and he presents it to her. And then we start into the dialogue. Gareth says, my lady, my love, a rose for a rose. We lead a charmed life here in a villian, don't we? And at that point, Lenore starts to cry. My dear, whatever's the matter? Have those marauding, whatever, chickens dug up your herb garden again? And Lenore says, my dear lord, with our family grown and gone, I'm lonesome. Oh, if only we had a little hatchie to care for and make us laugh with its antics. Okay, you see the difference? And that's how actually you set out a play too. You've got the scene one and then where it is. Then you have your brackets for the situation and the entrances and exits. And then you have the names in the middle and the dialogue set out like that. So just imagine a whole script like that, divided into scenes to show the different settings, perhaps. So that is the pattern of how to lay out a play as opposed to a story, how it looks. All right, I'm wrapping up now because I want some time to talk, but I just want to stress a couple points again. A story is not a play. We've said it a couple times. And a play is meant to be enacted on the stage. So a play is not a story, and a story is not a play. Show, not tell. Use movement and action instead of narration, unless the narration is purposeful and is really necessary. Use the story as an inspiration and don't be a slave to it. I had a chance to interview quite a few playwrights in real life a few years ago, and that was the big point that they stressed. Use the story as inspiration. Don't be a slave to it. Don't think you have to include absolutely everything that is in the story. You need to keep the parameters of the stage in mind and what's possible, and also how it's going to be actually done on the stage. That really is the job of the director. But still, the writer, if you can visualize it as you're writing, it makes it a bit easier later for the director. So write with the stage in mind and make changes to the action, characters, setting that are necessary to make your play work on the stage, not on the page. All right. I said we'd have a question and answer session now, and I just have some questions that I think are important that I'm going to pose first, particularly the last one. What is the difference between playwriting and directing? Here in Avilion, it is quite the ordinary thing to have the playwright then move on and direct the play. But it doesn't have to be that way. We might get some plays that the playwright says, I'd like someone else to direct this. And that's good too, because, sometimes a director can see things in a playwright's work that the playwright misses because they're too close to it. So we can do things both ways, both have the playwright be the director, but also have a different playwright and a different director. But there is a difference. I think sometimes when people are playwriting, they get so bound up in how they're going to stage it and direct it that it stymies them in their playwriting. Basically, you need to be able to visualize the play as you're writing it, but you don't have to know everything about how it's going to be staged, because that's the director's job. And so I would suggest when you're playwriting, just have general directions like enter Lenore, Lenore cries, exit night, hatches fly in, whatever. But don't actually say, hatches fly in from above, fly stage right, then go stage left, then go down stage, then land in a heap on the floor and cry. I mean, no, you don't need all that. You don't need stage left, stage right, up stage, down stage. That's the director. So just enough in the play script to give the director the idea. Now, I'm probably giving you a bad example on that, because I know when I used to work with Ham on plays, and we had these huge plays that we put on for about an hour and a half, we really needed to have the stage directions very carefully written in, because we didn't have enough time in the 8 rehearsals we had to actually do it all when we got to the stage. So that was a bad example. Okay, just keep that in mind. We talked about narrators in a play. Should I have acts with scenes? Yeah, unless it's all takes place in one place, in one setting, one time. But if you have, let's say, something that happens in the morning and something that happens in the afternoon, don't lump it all in one scene. Have 2 scenes, morning, afternoon, okay? Act breaks are usually for longer works. A lot of the plays we do in act are short, and you might just want scenes, scene 1, scene 2, scene 3. But if a longer work, you might have an act with scenes. Usually you have a new scene when something new is happening, or there's been a change of time, a change of direction, or something is different than what had gone before. How do I decide how many characters I need? Well, let me tell you, from a pragmatic point of view, when you're rehearsing a play, to get more than about 9 people together from all the time zones in the world, as we all know, is quite difficult. But likewise, even from a playwriting perspective, if you can keep your main characters down, the more characters you have on stage, the more confusing it might get for the audience. So try to think about, are certain characters in the story fulfilling the same function? So let's just say there are 4 different messengers in the story. could you consolidate that down into one messenger? So if we're having a ballroom scene for Cinderella, could we just have maybe a couple couples up there instead of like a whole ballroom, plastered with people? So just trying to think of the stage when you're writing, but also think about what suits a play text. And when an audience watches the play, how much are they going to be able to take in? And we've already talked a little bit about how we format the play. So as a playwright then, start with a story, analyze the story, see what's there, see what you want to keep, what you want to change, and look particularly at plot, characters, theme, and structure. Analyze the story and see if there's something happening below the surface that might be interesting, that would give you some inspiration on how you might make a unique version of, for the stage. And then, have fun. This whole process is supposed to be just passionate and a lot of fun. And so what I've said today, I've said a lot of things, and you might not want to take it all in or even want to follow any of it because there are different ways of doing things. But this is just one approach to give you a few things, a few elements to hang your writing on. So if you get stuck, especially like, what do I do next? Go back and look at some of these slides and say, oh yeah, what's the journey of the character here, So I'm going to stop there. We have now about 20 minutes for an open forum. Those of you who've written stories into plays, you might want to say a few words or share a few experiences or ask a few questions. So I'm just going to open it up now for general discussion and comments. In chat or in voice. We'll try to watch the chat as well. Yeah, maybe I've just stung you all so much. Well, when you're playwriting, I think my view is you should keep an open mind. Write it down. The director will tell you if you can't do it, So the question is, first question, how much do the limitations of SL mechanics have an impact? They do, particularly in the staging. But put the ideas down in your script, your play script, and then you can work on when we get to the actual production stage, things have to change a bit because of SL things. Yes, I'll read them. I've been asked to read the question. So the first one was about whether as a playwright you should let SL mechanics play a factor in your writing. And I would say my reaction is no. At the first, you got to be aware of what you can do on the stage, of course, but don't let it stymie you. And there was another. Does anyone else want to comment on that? Okay, well, that's my view anyway. Others may have a different view. I think you don't want to cut off your legs and arms before you get started. So I think try to keep it open-ended, and then if later, when you get to production, if you have to cut it back for some reason, do it then. Okay, the second question is something about Keisha's asking, I was thinking of a type of musical but still has a story but is told mostly through dance and song. Would that follow the same sort of format? I was talking about stories today, like stories like that you read in a book, let's say, or that you write. A dance format, probably still you need some sort, it's good to have a theme, if you've got doing a dance work with a few things. I think so it ties together. It's not just this item, this item, this item, this item, unless you want a variety show. So if you want your items to tie together, you have a theme. Maybe you have some sort of structure. Maybe it starts from solos that builds up to duets and then builds up to, mass dance numbers or the other way around. So I think you could still think about theme and structure. And your dances may have characters in them. They might not just be dancing blobs. They might be, people from Arabia dancing an Arabian dance, and there might be a princess and a prince. So you might have characters. So yes, I think some of these principles would still apply to that too. Okay, the next question is, if you end up directing the play, it might take several revisions of what will actually happen in order to make it work. That's Kalia speaking from experience. Would you like to share any more ideas on that? Kalia? It's a good point. Her point is, if you end up directing the play, it might take several revisions of what will actually happen in order to make it work. Oh, okay. Okay, good. All right, I'm just reading through the IMs here. A does show of dancing blobs. Okay, good. Any more questions? One thing I didn't talk a lot about is keeping the audience in mind when you're writing. If you're writing for children, let's say, which we don't in Avillion, we've got a very open policy here. So we've got plays from all time periods, all subjects, as long as they're in good taste, whatever that means, and as long as they're not too violent and overly sexualized and that kind of thing. Anything's fair go. We like to have realistic plays. We like to have fantasies, the whole range of plays. But if you are playwriting and you know specifically you're writing for a certain audience, let's say that you know you're writing for Avillians. Well, and if you can make your story relevant to Avillion and put in a few of the local events like, the chickens in the tavern and some of the things we all know about, and dancing at the drum circle, well, it makes it more relevant for the audience. So sure, if you're a writer, you know your audience, you don't be limited by it. I mean, don't think, I have to write everything just for, but if you can put in a few, it makes things more relevant for the audience. Yeah, relevance is good. And certainly you would write a little bit differently for children than you would for adults, I would guess. And also in Second Life, one of the other things that you need to consider when you're writing is if you're going to eventually do it in voice, live, if you're going to pre-record it, if you're going to do it in local chat. That's something that you might want to consider as a playwright because it might shape a little bit how you develop your play script. Talking about burlesque dances here. I'm nothing against burlesque if it's tasteful. It's an OC area. Okay, yes. Scout made a good point. She says one of the restrictions to SL is animations and gestures. We can't always find exactly what we need. I wouldn't let that limit you in your playwriting, but certainly when you get to the directing stage, you may have to talk to the playwright and say, look, we just can't have them do this, so it's impossible to shoot them out of a cannon. But of course you can actually. I have seen a cannon where you can shoot a person in Second Life. But certainly there might be some aspect that you might have to just adjust in the play. Yeah. Yes, Barty. I hope I haven't missed any questions. Speak up if I've missed something. A play, just Demria says, a play can be anything. Example, a poor man with a jackpot in a casino, and we can see how he uses his fortune. Yep, good suggestion, Dem. Yes. Yes, so Barty is talking about his play, and he has written his own original story, which is really commendable. And then he translated that or changed that into a play, and he used the characters that were actually in the story. He also made the animals into characters when he directed it. So through the direction of the play, although I can't remember in the actual story if the animals featured a lot, I know they were there, but in the play they became very important. Oh, good. Yeah, Balder's noting that with the new bento, there are going to be more options for the use of gestures and animations. Yes, and we have some very good animators, I must say, already here. And I think that's an excellent idea. When we're directing a show, often we go with what we can find rather than building on the expertise of people who might be able to build us exactly what we might need. I think that's a great idea, Scout. And I know there are already people here who do that. So, yep. Ryan's one, Sarah's one, and I'm sure there are others of you that do it as well. So let's keep that in mind. Any other comments or questions, either about playwriting or any other things that we do in ACT, or, I hope you're all jumping up in your shoes now wanting to do some playwriting. Just a little bit about ACT. I know most of you know all this already, but our brief is to do short plays frequently. So some of you may say, she's at it again. She's doing another play. We've got 2 plays this month. Yep, that's right. That's kind of our brief, is we get a play up, we get as many people involved as we can, we put it on, and then we move on so that more people have an opportunity, we get more shows on, we get more people involved. We have also had the tradition of working with Avillion entertainers. to put on one show a year. This year we were lucky. We hit the jackpot. We put on two. We did the highlights from My Fair Lady, and we also did the Christmas show, The Nutcracker. Next year, possibly, we'll only be doing one major show at Christmas, because there's so many of you that are interested in writing, which is fantastic, that we have most of the season already filled up with plays. But there's still room. If some of you want to do, there's still room. We also are planning, so please get in touch with me if you want to do a show or you want to write one. Even if you just want to write one and get someone else to direct it, that's fine. But sometimes it is a lovely learning experience too, to write it and then present it on the stage. We're going to do a series of workshops, as I said. This is the first one. This is not really a workshop, I'm sorry. More presentation, discussion kind of. But what we're going to do, we want to do some workshops on choreography, directing, for sure, designing and building. And so over the year, watch for these. We'll try to do one a month at least on different aspects of the theater. And so if you have an area of expertise also that you would like to share with ACT and put on a workshop, just let me know, or let the associate directors know, Kat and Scout, and we will try to accommodate that. There's always help. So you sit there and think, yeah, that's a nice idea, but I could never do this on my own. Okay, there's lots of help. So if you need help writing or directing, we've also got the lovely bards who have so many good writers there. So that I'm sure, any one of them would be happy to read a draft of your script, and so would I. So would Kat and Scout and others here who put on plays before. So please don't feel you're on your own. This is a big team effort here, which is good. Okay, I'm going to publish the 2017 season as we know it at the moment. I'll probably put it in the Chronicle next week. So if you want to see what's happening, or if you want to ask me personally, I can send you a copy of that and to see whether you might fit in. We've had a really full session. I've given you a lot to think about, I hope. And if there's nothing else that you would like to talk about now, I think we can just say thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate your attendance. It's been wonderful. And your questions as well. Thank you. I know that someone is making a copy of the chat log, so if anyone would like a copy of that, maybe I'll just put it in through ACT so you can get it. Yes, you're welcome. Thank you very much for being here. Make sure you get your notes from the back. Those of you who came in later, there are full notes from this on the back panel there. Just click. And please feel free to stay if you like. But the session is now over. Thank you. That's nice.